Did you know you can fly without having a current FAA medical examination? I know it seems crazy, but if you use basic med instead, it is possible. And that can be a huge relief to my fellow pilots out there who don't want to go to an aviation medical examiner or AME to get their exam. But before you can use basic med, there's some things you need to know about and some restrictions you should be aware of. And I'm going to explain everything you need to know in this video right here. Welcome to Free Pilot Training. I'm Josh. You're probably watching this video today because you're interested in flying without an FAA medical certificate. And you can do that if you operate under basic med. But let's take a look at what you need to do if you want to go that route.
You'll find most of the stuff I'll be discussing today in FAR 6123. But in a nutshell, if you have a valid driver's license and if you've ever had a valid FAA medical certificate, you may be eligible for basic med.
If you or a loved one does not have stage 4 diabetes, you have a driver's license, and you have a valid medical certificate, you may be eligible for basic med.
Okay, so this brings up an important point. Before you can fly under basic med, you have to have had a valid medical certificate in the past. This could have been a first, second, or third class medical certificate. It doesn't matter which one you had, as long as you had one and it was valid at some point after July 14th, 2006. In addition to that, that previous certificate can be expired, but it cannot have been suspended or revoked. Even if the certificate was issued under a special issuance, that's okay. Now, if you're a new student pilot, you're probably realizing that you might not be eligible for basic med quite yet, because you've never had a medical certificate in the past. You should really still watch this video because you could get asked a question about it on your written exam. So just hang out with us for the rest of the video if you would. Plus, you might also want to use this once your certificate does expire. Anyway, with all this in mind, if you do decide to use basic med, there's some restrictions on what you can fly. You'll find these restrictions in FAR 61-113. First of all, you can only fly an aircraft that has a maximum takeoff weight of 6,000 pounds or less. And this means if the airplane is certified to fly at 6,001 pounds, you cannot fly this thing under basic med. It doesn't matter if the actual takeoff weight is 5,500 pounds. You have to look at the total weight that it's capable of carrying. Anyway, if the maximum takeoff weight is 6,001 pounds and you want to fly it, you need to get an actual FAA medical certificate. Next, under basic med, you can only have up to 6 occupants in the airplane, and this includes the pilot. It's not 6 passengers and then the pilot, it's a total of 6 people in the entire aircraft. In addition to that, you cannot fly an aircraft that's certified with more than 6 seats. If it has 8 seats, you can't just take 2 of them out. It has to be certified with 6 seats or less.
Now you're probably noticing the number 666 here. Leave it up to the FAA to come up with a set of limitations like that. Is the FAA implying something a little more sinister? There's no real way to be sure, but it's a great way to remember the 3 main limitations for flying under basic med.
Anyway, enough of that. There are a few more limitations you'll need to follow if you're operating under basic med. You cannot operate above 18,000 feet MSL if you're flying under basic med. For those of you who forgot, this is basically Class A airspace. Well, I guess technically Class A starts at 18,000 feet exactly, but just remember you can't fly above 18,000. Oh yeah, and as long as you're IFR rated, you can operate under IFR or VFR. Either one is fine. Next, you cannot fly faster than 250 knots. Now, it doesn't say anywhere in the regs that you can't fly an aircraft that's capable of flying faster than that, but you as the pilot cannot exceed 250 knots if you're flying under basic med. Another limitation is that you cannot fly outside of the US. Now, I actually think there are a couple countries that do allow you to fly under basic med, but I have no clue which ones those are. You'll have to do the research on that for yourself to find the answer to that. And if someone here knows, I would really appreciate you putting that in the comments. Okay, now here's the crazy part about all these restrictions. We know that we can't do any of this stuff right here, but oddly enough, there's nothing in the regs that say you can't fly a multi-engine aircraft. As long as the airplane and you meet all of these requirements, you can fly a multi-engine aircraft, as long as you're certificated to do that, obviously. There's nothing that says you can't operate turbine engines under basic med either. But don't forget that if you're operating an aircraft with a turbojet engine, you've got to have a type rating. But as long as you have that type rating, the type of engine doesn't matter. In addition to all that, the horsepower of the engine doesn't matter either. Obviously, you've got to have that high performance endorsement in your logbook if you're going to operate an aircraft with an engine that has 200 horsepower or more. But as long as you have that endorsement, you can operate a high-performance aircraft under basic med.
You can even operate a complex aircraft, which means you can fly an airplane with retractable gear. Just remember to extend that gear when you go to land.
Okay, there are a couple other requirements that you should know about when you're operating under basic med, but you kind of have to read in between the lines of FAR 6123 and FAR 61113. If you have your commercial pilot certificate and you want to operate under those privileges, you have to have at least a second-class medical certificate. I explained this in a little bit more detail in my last video, but what that means to you is that if you don't have at least a second-class medical, you cannot carry people or stuff for hire. So if you're operating under basic med, you cannot get paid to carry people and stuff around. Basically, when you're operating under basic med, you're limited to private pilot privileges. That's why FAR 61113 applies to us in this case, even if we have a commercial pilot certificate. Well, what does that mean to me? Well, that means we can fly in the furtherance of a business. This would be like an aircraft salesman or something like that. We can share flight expenses with our passengers as well, and we can conduct search operations like the Civil Air Patrol does. Now here's the crazy part. If you dig more into 6123, you'll see that a flight instructor can also give instruction under basic med. The caveat to this is that he still needs to meet all those restrictions we talked about earlier. For example, your instructor can't give you a checkout on an aircraft with 7 seats. Nope, that's not allowed. He's limited to 666, 18,000 feet, 250 knots, and flights in country just like everyone else who's flying under basic med.
Okay, let's look at a few more requirements for flying under basic med. First, you have to have a current and valid U.S. driver's license.
The funny thing about basic med is that the federal aviation regulations don't actually call it basic med. They call it operations requiring a U.S. driver's license. So basically, you're using your driver's license as a medical certificate when you're flying under basic med. I guess they figure that if you're healthy enough to operate a car or a truck at high speed, then you're probably healthy enough to operate an aircraft as well. But anyway, what this means to you is that you have to have a current and valid U.S. driver's license. Any state license is good as long as it's valid and not expired. You cannot use a driver's license from another country, a passport, or an international driver's license. These won't work. The FAA is trusting your state's driver's license medical standards, so apparently we don't trust the driver's license from other countries. Think that through next time you're driving overseas. In addition to having a current and valid U.S. driver's license, if you want to operate under basic med, you have to agree to a National Driver Register check. And basically this is a database that they can track all your speeding tickets, DUIs, and all the driving sins you may have. So if you have something to hide from the FAA, you may just want to get an FAA physical.
Now, I'm not saying you should hide things from the FAA. I'm just saying, I don't know what I'm saying. Just be aware of this.
Okay, so if we go back to FAR 61113, we'll find a couple other requirements for operating under basic med. There are 2 things you have to carry in your logbook anytime you go fly when you operate under basic med. First, you have to have a completed medical examination checklist. Now, it doesn't really say this right here, but this checklist has to be filled out by a state licensed doctor or physician, and they have to give you a medical examination to check all the things listed on this checklist. Once they check you for all the stuff listed here, they sign the form and you keep this in your logbook showing that you're medically qualified to fly. And that's important to remember as well. Make sure they sign this thing. It's not valid unless they sign it. This examination is what the FAA calls a comprehensive medical examination, or CME. And you have to get a new CME every 48 months. And those are not calendar months. That's just a 48-month period. So if you got the exam on June 11th, then you have to get another one done June 11th, 48 months later. But as you can see, this is a pretty good option because you only have to get checked by a doctor every 4 years under basic med. Now you can get this checklist a couple different places. You can find it in the FAA's Advisory Circular 68-1, and if you Google search AC 68-1, it should be one of the first things to pop up. Just make sure you have the most current version. At the time of this video, we're still on version A for this advisory circular, but just make sure you have the most current version. You can also just go to www.faa.gov and search for Comprehensive Medical Examination, and it should be one of the first things to pop up. Let's see, I'll just click this one right here to open it up, and then I just print this guy out and take it with me to the doctor when I go to get the exam.
In addition to the comprehensive medical exam, you have to have one more thing in your logbook. You have to take a basic med education course every 24 calendar months.
And as I've mentioned before, a calendar month just means that your training expires on the last day of the month, 24 months from the date you took the training. So if I took the training on the 4th of July because I don't have a life, it expires on July 31st, 24 months from that date. Now it's really important to note that this video you're watching does not count for this training, but there are a few places where you can get the training, and usually it's free. They go into a little bit more detail on some of the things you have to know before you can operate under Basic Med. If you search for Basic Med on the FAA's website, it's usually one of the first things to pop up. I'll just click this one right here, and it looks like you can actually get that CME checklist here as well. But down here, it looks like we've got two options for that Basic Med training. I don't know much about this one right here, but I've never been disappointed with an AOPA course, so I recommend just doing this one. And once you've completed the course, you'll get a certificate of completion, and you can print that puppy out and put it in your logbook. And now you're ready to fly under Basic Med. Now, they'll go over this a little bit more in the training, but if you happen to have any of these medical conditions right here, you're going to have to get a one-time special issuance. That basically means that you're going to have a hard time getting medically qualified, but quite frankly, there's a good reason for that. If you're having heart issues or there's a chance you could have a seizure or something in flight, it's probably not a good idea to let you fly without making sure you're not going to put others at risk. In addition to that, there are a few mental health issues that could require you to get that one-time special issuance as well. And the only reason they're doing this is to be sure that we're not putting others at risk. And once again, they'll explain all this stuff in more detail in that course you need to take. But just know these conditions might keep you out of the sky, or at the very least, they'll delay you being able to fly. Now there's one more thing I want to mention that should go without saying, but I'm going to say it anyways. When you're flying under Basic Med, or really even if you are flying under a medical certificate, there are going to be times when your health might affect your ability to fly. And I'm just going to say this once, don't be stupid. Please just don't fly and or get treated by a doctor. If you have a valid medical, or if you're flying under Basic Med legally, and you start developing health issues, and you still go fly, you can get yourself in a lot of trouble if you have an accident and they find out that you weren't actually healthy enough to fly an aircraft. And if you're wondering what regulation they could use to get you in trouble, look no further than the trusty old 9113. No person may operate an aircraft in a careless or reckless manner so as to endanger the life or property of another. And if you're not healthy enough to be out flying, you are endangering the life or property of another. And I know I sound like a robot when I say this, but consider the I'm safe checklist. If I'm dealing with any one of these issues right here, any one of these is a good reason to just ground yourself. It's not worth flying if you're going to be putting yourself or others at risk. Anyway, once again, if you're operating under Basic Med, don't forget to put that signed CME checklist and your training certificate in your logbook. You have to have those if you're going to be operating under Basic Med. I hope you guys enjoyed today's lesson on how to fly without a medical certificate. In my next video, I'm going to go into more detail on the privileges and limitations you're going to have as a private pilot. When I'm done with that video, I'll throw it right here. But if you'd just like to have a little bit of fun watching a cool flying video, check this one out. That'll get your motivation back up for some more studying. See ya!
Approach, you're not going to believe this. I just spotted free pilot training. I'm going to keep on watching.